We've been following the life of Shasta and Bree and Erebus and Wynn, and we've been seeing how Aslan has been guiding them through their life. And even in the difficult situations, we see how Aslan has used these for their benefit, and yet they went through a lot of hard things. Ecclesiastes 3:11, He has made everything beautiful in His time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. And so basically what we're looking at in this story is that God is controlling everything, although He does give free will, and He allows us to make our own choices. But he turns everything to beauty in the end, and uses everything to the benefit of people who love Him and to His glory. And we know that there's an eternity to come. No one can really understand what He is doing until we get to that eternity. Then we'll understand more and understand why. So we're coming to the end and the conclusion of the story, and we see that Aslan meets a lot of the characters that have been through the whole process of running away from Calormen. We see that Aslan has been watching their actions and judging their hearts as they go, watching what they do and why they do things. This is the final lesson we get from this book, is that God is watching us. Jeremiah 17:10 says, I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind, to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. We have a good, just God who is in heaven and who is watching our actions. It's unbelievable, but He takes care, and we're that important to Him that He is observing us, and observing us in every action we take, and observing our hearts for the reason why we're taking the actions we take. And we come to the end of our story, and I want to just read some parts of what happens in the end. Shasta is alone in the mountains. He's lost, and he knows that there's some kind of a beast walking next to him, a very huge beast. And he's scared, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to run away because he knows the beast will get him. And finally he speaks up, and he says, Who are you? He said, scarcely above a whisper. One who has waited long for you to speak, said the thing. Its voice was not loud, but very large and deep. Are you a giant? Asked Shasta. You might call me a giant, said the large voice, but I am not like the creature you call giants. I can't see you at all, said Shasta, after staring very hard. Then, for an even more terrible idea had come into his head, he said almost in a scream, You're not something dead, are you? Oh, please, please, do go away. What harm have I ever done you? Oh, I am the unluckiest person in the whole world. Once more he felt the warm breath of the thing on his hand and face. There, it said, that is not the breath of a ghost. Tell me your sorrows. Shasta was a little reassured by the breath, so he told how he had never known his real father or mother, and had been brought up sternly by the fishermen. And then he told the story of his escape, and how they were chased by lions and forced to swim for their lives, and of all the dangers in Tashbaan, and about his night among the tombs, and how the beasts howled at him out of the desert. And he told about the heat and thirst of their desert journey, and how they were almost at their goal when another lion chased them and wounded Erebus, and also how very long it was since he had had anything to eat. I do not call you unfortunate, said the large voice. Don't you think it was bad luck to meet so many lions, said Shasta. There was only one lion, said the voice. What on earth do you mean? I've just told you there were at least two the first night, and there was only one, but he was swift-footed. How do you know? I was the lion. And as Shasta gasped with open mouth and said nothing, the voice continued. I was the lion who forced you to join with Erebus. I was the cat who comforted you among the houses of the dead. I was a lion who drove the jackals from you while you slept. I was a lion who gave the horse the new strength of fear for the last mile so that you should reach King Lune in time. And I was a lion you do not remember who pushed the boat in which you lay, a child near death, so that it came to shore where a man sat, wakeful at midnight to receive you. Then it was you who wounded Erebus. It was I. But what for? Child, said the voice. I am telling you your story, not hers. I tell no one any story but his own. Who are you? Asked Shasta. Myself, said the voice, very deep and low, so that the earth shook. And again, myself, loud and clear and gay, and then the third time, myself, whispered so softly you could hardly hear it, and yet it seemed to come from all around you, as if the leaves rustled with it. Shasta was no longer afraid that the voice belonged to something that would eat him, nor that it was the voice of a ghost, but a new and different sort of trembling came over him, yet he felt glad too. So we have Shasta here that meets Aslan, and Aslan tells him that he's been a part of their story the whole time, and has been watching over him in a certain way, and has been guiding him in a certain way, and yet everything that Shasta did he saw. And Shasta had choices to make the whole way through his life, just as we see in Joseph, in the story of Joseph. We know that God used every single event of Joseph's life to parallel his own, the life that Jesus would lead. And we know that God used Joseph's life to bring food to Egypt and to his own family. And he guided them, but Joseph had choices to make all the way through his life. And this is kind of the same thing. When Bree and Erebus are at the hermit's house, and they've been left behind by Shasta, and they've been there for a long time now, as Erebus gets better from the wounds she received. And they're talking about returning to Narnia, and Bree still doesn't want to go because his tail is cut short. You remember, he's quite proud. And they're talking here about Aslan. All right, this is the conversation they have. Bree, said Erebus, who was not very interested in the cut of his tail, I've been wanting to ask you something for a long time. Why do you keep on swearing by the lion and by the lion's mane? I thought you hated lions. So I do, answered Bree. But when I speak of the lion, of course, I mean Aslan, the great deliverer of Narnia, who drove away the witch in the winter. All Narnians swear by him. But is he a lion? No, of course not, said Bree, in a rather shocked voice. All the stories about him in Tashbaan say he is, replied Erebus. And if he isn't a lion, why do you call him a lion? Well, you'd hardly understand that at your age, said Bree. And I was only a little fowl when I left, so I don't quite fully understand it myself. Bree was standing with his back to the green wall while he said this, and the others too were facing him, and he was talking in a rather superior tone with his eyes half shut. That was why he didn't see the changed expression in the faces of Hwin and Erebus. They had good reason to have opened their mouths and staring eyes, because while Bree spoke they saw an enormous lion leap up from outside and balance itself on the top of the green wall. Only it was a brighter yellow, and it was bigger and more beautiful and more alarming than any lion they had ever seen. And at once it jumped down inside the wall and began approaching Bree from behind. It made no noise at all, and Hwin and Erebus couldn't make any noise themselves, no more than if they were frozen. No doubt, continued Bree, when they speak of him as a lion, they only mean he's as strong as a lion, or to our enemies, of course, as fierce as a lion, or something of that kind. Even a little girl like you, Erebus, must see that it would be quite absurd to suppose he is a real lion. Indeed, it would be disrespectful. If he was a lion, he'd have to be a beast just like the rest of us. Why? And here Bree began to laugh. If he was a lion, he'd have 4 paws and a tail and whiskers. Ow, help! For just as he said the word whiskers, one of Aslan's had actually tickled his ear. Bree shot away like an arrow to the other side of the enclosure and there turned. The wall was too high for him to jump, and he could fly no further. Erebus and Hwin both stared back, and there was about a second of intense silence. Then Hwin, though shaking all over, gave a strange little neigh, and trotted across to the lion. Please, she said, you're so beautiful. You may eat me if you like. I'd sooner be eaten by you than fed by anyone else. Dearest daughter, said Aslan, planting a lion's kiss on her twitching velvet nose, I knew you would not be long in coming to me. Joy shall be yours. Then he lifted his head and spoke in a louder voice. Now, Bree, he said, you poor, proud, frightened horse, draw near. Nearer still, my son. Do not dare not to touch me. Touch me, smell me, Here are my paws, here is my tail. These are my whiskers. I am a true beast. Aslan, said Bree in a shaken voice, I'm afraid I must be rather a fool. Happy the horse who knows that while he is still young, or the human either. Draw near, Aravis, my daughter. See, my paws are velveted. You will not be torn this time. This time, sir, said Aravis. It was I who wounded you, said Aslan. I am the only lion you met in all your journeying. Do you know why I tore you? No, sir. The scratches on your back, tear for tear, throb for throb, blood for blood, were equal to the stripes laid on the back of your stepmother's slave, because of the drugged sleep you cast upon her. You needed to know what it felt like. Yes, sir. Please, ask on, my dear, said Aslan. Will any more harm come to her by what I did? Child, said the lion, I am telling you your story, not hers. No one is told any story but their own. Then he shook his head and spoke in a lighter voice. Be merry, little one, he said. We shall meet soon again. But before that, you will have another visitor. Then in one bound, he reached the top of the wall and vanished from their sight. So that is what happened to Bree. And Bree's attitude and his beliefs about Aslan was also judged by Aslan. He knew exactly what he believed about him. And eventually, those attitudes and beliefs were confronted. So here we have what's going to happen to Kor, and Kor is the name of Shasta, his actual name. Sorry, this is Shasta, or Kor, talking to Aravis and explaining to her what happened. And he's telling her that he is going to become the king. Even though education and all sorts of horrible things are going to happen to me. But you want the story, well, Corin and I were twins, and about a week after we were born, apparently they took us to a wise old centaur in Narnia to be blessed or something. Now this centaur was a prophet, as a good many centaurs are. Perhaps you haven't seen any centaurs yet. There were some in the battle yesterday, most remarkable people, but I can't say I feel quite at home with them yet. I say, Aravis, there are going to be a lot of things to get used to in these northern countries. Yes, there are, said Aravis, but get on with your story. Well, as soon as he saw Corin and me, it seems this centaur looked at me and said, a day will come when that boy will save Archenland from the deadliest danger in which ever she lay. So of course my father and mother were very pleased, but there was someone present who wasn't. This was a chap called the Lord Barr, who had been father's Lord Chancellor, and apparently he'd done something wrong, bezzling or some word like that. I didn't understand that part very well, and father had to dismiss him, but nothing else was done to him, and he was allowed to go on living in Archenland. But he must have been as bad as he could be, for it came out afterward he had been in the pay of the Tisroc, and had sent a lot of secret information to Tashban. So as soon as he heard I was going to save Archenland from a great danger, he decided I must be put out of the way. Well, he succeeded in kidnapping me, I don't exactly know how, and rode away down the winding arrow to the coast. He'd had everything prepared, and there was a ship manned with his own followers lying ready for him, and he put out to sea with me on board. But father got wind of it, though not quite in time, and was after him as quickly as he could. The Lord Barr was already at sea when father reached the coast, but not out of sight, and father was embarked in one of his own warship within 20 minutes. It must have been a wonderful chase. They were 6 days following Barr's galleon, and brought her to battle on the 7th. It was a great sea fight. I heard a lot about it yesterday evening, from 10 o'clock in the morning till sunset. Our people took the ship in the end, but I wasn't there. The Lord Barr himself had been killed in the battle, but one of his men said that early that morning, as soon as he saw he was certain to be overhauled, Barr had given me to one of his knights, and sent us both away in the ship's boat, and that boat was never seen again. But of course, that was the same boat that Aslan, he seems to be at the back of all the stories, pushed ashore at the right place for Arshish to pick me up. I wish I knew that knight's name, for he must have kept me alive and starved himself to do it. I suppose Aslan would say that was part of someone else's story, said Aravis. I was forgetting that, said Cor. And I wonder how the prophecy will work out, said Aravis. And what the great danger is that you're to save Archenland from. Well, said Cor rather awkwardly, they seem to think I've done it already. Aravis clapped her hands. Why, of course, she said. How stupid I am. And how wonderful. Archenland can never be in much great danger than it was when Rabadash had crossed the Arrow with his 200 horses, and you hadn't yet got through with your message. Don't you feel proud? I think I feel a bit scared, said Cor. And you'll be living in Anvar now, said Aravis rather wistfully. Oh, said Cor, I'd nearly forgotten what I came about. Father wants you to come and live with us. He says there's been no lady in the court. They call it the court, I don't know why, since Mother died. Do, Aravis. You'll like Father and Corin. So there you have the ending of the story, where Aravis does end up living in the courts, and I think she ends up marrying Cor, and Corin becomes Corin Thunderfists, who is amazing at boxing, so it says, and Bree and Wynn are friends, and they go and visit often, and so the story turns out to end well. And so, this is very much to do with Ecclesiastes 3:11, where no one can fathom what God does from beginning to end. And so, it's not that God causes all these things to happen, or Aslan, if you will, but he has a part to play in the actions of men. Men have free will, and they act, and God guides and changes situations for His glory. But the point here is that Aslan was there the whole time, and Aslan was watching the lives of all the characters in the story. And that is exactly what's happening to you and to me. As you live your life, there is nothing that God misses, and that what happens to you, either good or bad. And your reaction to what happens is extremely important. You can choose to react negatively and get angry, or you can choose to continue and believe that God is there and He is in control, and that He will turn all things to good if you continue to trust in Him, as Joseph did in his life. He never gave up. Here we're going to read a few verses. Proverbs 16:2. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Bree thought he was a pretty good horse, and he thought he was powerful and courageous and wise, and he found out at the end that he wasn't that wise and not that courageous, and he had to swallow that pill. But he did do that, and Aslan said that is a blessing. It was a blessing to Bree that he learned that lesson. But we've already read Jeremiah 17:10. Our hearts are deceitful. We think of ourselves in a certain way. But the Lord searches our hearts, and He examines our minds. Everything that you do and the reasons why you do it. He knows your pain. He knows your sorrows. And yet He examines you to know what you're doing and why you're doing things. Jeremiah 17:10 says that He will reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. Our rewards will be according to what we do, and this is repeated all through the Bible. As we see in Matthew 25, Jesus says that in the end, when God separates the sheep from the goats, that it is by their actions that they will be separated, because of their actions and because of their hearts and the reason and the love that was found in their hearts. Romans 2:6 says, God will repay each person according to what they have done. Revelation 20:11-15. Then I saw a great white throne, and Him who was seated on it. The earth and the heaven fled from His presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. You see how many times it was repeated. How it's repeated that they were judged according to what they had done. And it's true that it is not because of our deeds that we go to heaven. We're not saved by our deeds, because we would never enter into heaven with our deeds. It is by grace that we are saved. And yet, because of grace, we are still rewarded according to our deeds, if there is any deeds that we have done that are considered to be out of love and done for our fellow men. There are many Christians who will end up in heaven with no rewards, because they have not done anything deserving any rewards. And this is taught to us by Paul in the book of Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 3:10-13, by the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on the foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. You see, Paul is saying here that the foundation is Christ. So you're saved through Christ, through grace and through faith. And yet you are to build on that foundation, and you are to be very careful in the way you build on that foundation. So once you become a Christian, what you do after that is important, and how you do the things after that. As we read in 1 Corinthians 13, we know that everything we do has to be out of love. So our motives are important. And even small things done in love are huge in the eyes of God. He loves those who love. And here Paul says that the way he works and the way he continues in his role in building the church is going to be judged by God. And his actions and his deeds and his thoughts and his heart is going to be judged. And so he says, whatever you build on top of this foundation, which is the foundation of grace and faith, you can build with all kinds of things: gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw. But all these things are going to be tested by fire. So if you've built with a proper mind and with your full heart, those deeds are seen by God, and that's like building with gold, silver, or costly stones. A match will be set to it, and they will not burn up, and you will receive a reward. But if you build with wood, hay, and straw, you could have a huge ministry, and people outside will say, wow, what a huge building. You can build a skyscraper with wood, hay, or straw. But when that match is lit, there will be nothing left, because it had absolutely no value, because it was not done in love, and it was not done out of a pure heart. So there will be no reward for that person. They will be saved because of faith, because of the foundation of Christ, but there will not be rewards. So the way you live is extremely important. God is watching you as you go through life, and He is there the whole way. Mark 9:41, truly I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name, because you belong to the Messiah, will certainly not lose their reward. Here we see that even small actions done for the right reason is recorded in heaven. Even small things like giving a cup of cold water to someone, to a child, or to a servant of God with the right heart, is something that's going to be rewarded in heaven. So that means it's going to be recorded and remembered. And this is what 1 Corinthians 13 teaches. It says you can give all your money to the poor, and yet it means absolutely nothing if it's not done out of love. And here we see the opposite of that statement, is that you can even give just one cup of water to someone in love, truly respecting who they are in Christ. And that will be recorded and remembered and rewarded. So actions are important, as we learn from this story. Listen to Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. And we know that in the end, all the bad things that do happen will be turned around and will be used for the glory of God in the end. And so it doesn't mean that we're going to be blessed and that we're going to be rich and have no problems in this life. That's not at all what it means. But it means that we can have faith, just like Joseph, that God is good and God will bring about His righteous plans. Not only is God working for the good of those who love Him and for the glory of God, but we also know that God understands our weaknesses. He understands the hurts that we have, and we don't need to hide the hurts and the bitterness that we might have in our hearts. Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. So here we see that Jesus was tempted in all ways, and he understands weakness. He understands the pain that you've been through. Jesus understands, but that does not mean that we can do whatever we want. We're still responsible for our attitudes. We're still responsible for the choices we make. And so how are you going to build on the foundation of Christ? How are you going to live your life? Are you going to live your life and building on this foundation with good deeds, with precious stones and silver and gold? Or are you going to build with straw, just like, oh, I'll go to church every Saturday, and maybe I'll give offering, every now and then I'll give some money to the church. And so your heart is not behind it. There's no love behind that. Or are you going to be passionate? God is watching us, and he's searching our hearts to know why we do things, and he's watching what we're doing. So I hope you enjoyed reading about the horse and his boy a bit and hearing about it. I hope that you go and you take this book, or at least you go on YouTube. You can find the horse and his boy, and you can listen to it. It's a great story.